The world as people once knew it was gone. A devastating plague had turned the majority of humanity into undead creatures, zombies that roamed the earth with a hunger for the living. Cities were abandoned, and the remnants of civilization lay in ruins. Amid this chaos, a small group of survivors had managed to hold out in an old, abandoned high-rise building. The survivors had taken refuge in the top floors of the building, which they had fortified to keep out the undead. They were led by Mark, a former engineer who had become the group's de facto leader. With him were Anna, a compassionate doctor, Dave, a skilled mechanic, and Lily, a teenage girl who had lost her family to the outbreak. Despite the grim reality, the group had managed to create a semblance of order and routine. One evening, as the survivors sat around a makeshift table, their radio crackled to life. They hadn't heard a broadcast in months, and the sudden noise startled them. Mark picked up the radio, and a shaky voice came through, saying, "If anyone is out there, we've found a sanctuary. It's a military base with supplies and protection. Coordinates: 35.6895 degrees north, 139.6917 degrees east." The survivors were immediately intrigued. The coordinates pointed to a location in Japan, far from their current base in the United States. The promise of safety and resources was tempting, but they knew they had to be cautious. Mark turned to the group, his face a mixture of hope and skepticism. "It's a long journey, but it might be our best chance for survival. What do you all think?" Anna, always practical, nodded. "It's worth investigating. We need supplies, and if there's a chance of safety, we should take it." Dave, the mechanic who had been keeping their vehicle in working order, added, "I can get the vehicle ready. We'll need to make sure it's in top shape for the journey." Lily, who had been silent until now, looked up with a mixture of hope and fear. "What if it's a trap?" Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll be careful. We've survived this long by being cautious. We just need to stick together." The next morning, the group began preparing for their journey. They gathered supplies, including food, water, and medical supplies. Dave worked on the vehicle, reinforcing it and making sure it was capable of withstanding the rough terrain and potential attacks. The group spent hours fortifying their vehicle and double-checking their equipment. As they set out, the journey was rough. The roads were filled with abandoned vehicles and debris, and they had to navigate carefully to avoid attracting the attention of zombies. They traveled through desolate cities and forests, always on high alert. The constant threat of zombies was a reminder of the danger they faced. Days turned into weeks as they made their way across the country. They scavenged for food and supplies along the way, carefully avoiding large groups of zombies. Their journey was exhausting, but their determination to reach the military base kept them going. Finally, they arrived at the coordinates. What they saw was both promising and unsettling. The military base was surrounded by high fences and looked fortified, but the gate was slightly ajar. The sight of the abandoned base was eerie, and they knew they had to be cautious. The group approached the gate, carefully pushing it open. They entered the base, finding signs of life, footprints, scraps of food, and broken weapons. It was clear that someone had been here recently. They followed a trail that led to the base's main building. Inside the building, they found scattered maps and documents. Anna picked up a journal from a table and began to read aloud. The journal was filled with desperate entries, detailing the base's downfall. The writer mentioned that the base had been compromised by zombies, and they had tried to hold out but were forced to evacuate to underground bunkers. "We need to find those bunkers," Mark said, his voice firm. "If they're still intact, they might provide the shelter and supplies we need." The group followed the journal's instructions and made their way to the underground tunnels. The tunnels were dark, damp, and filled with unsettling noises. They could hear the faint sound of their footsteps echoing through the narrow passages. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, they suddenly heard a loud scream. Lily had fallen behind and was struggling with a figure in tattered military gear. The figure had an unnaturally wide grin and was covered in dried blood. "Help me!" Lily cried out. Mark and Dave rushed back to help. They managed to pull Lily away from the figure, who retreated into the darkness. The group was shaken but continued down the tunnels, their nerves on edge. The tunnels seemed to stretch endlessly. The survivors were exhausted, their nerves frayed from the constant tension. They reached the end of the tunnel and found a door labeled, "Safe Zone." With a mixture of hope and apprehension, they opened the door and entered. Inside the safe zone, they found a room filled with supplies, medical equipment, and cots. It was a welcome sight after their grueling journey. They began to relax, believing they had finally found a safe place. Anna checked the medical supplies while Dave inspected the room for any signs of danger. Mark and Lily sat by the supplies, their exhaustion evident. They were hopeful but still wary. As night fell, the group settled in for a rest. The tension in the room was palpable, but they tried to remain optimistic. However, Mark woke up in the early hours of the morning to a strange noise. He noticed that the door to the safe zone was slightly open. Mark quietly stepped out and followed the noise to a small room where he found Captain Hayes and several men in military gear. They were gathered around a table with maps and documents. Mark overheard a conversation that sent a chill down his spine. "We can't let them leave. They're a threat to our plan." The realization hit Mark hard. The figures in military gear were not just survivors, they had sinister intentions. Mark quickly returned to the safe zone and woke Anna, Dave, and Lily. "We need to get out of here," Mark said urgently. "They're planning something dangerous. We're in grave danger." The group quickly gathered their supplies and made their way back to the emergency tunnels. They were just about to leave when they heard the clanking of metal. The military figures had discovered their escape. The survivors raced through the tunnels, the sound of their pursuers growing louder. As they reached the end of the tunnel, they found a ladder leading to an access hatch. They climbed up and emerged back in the base's outer area. The gate was still open, but the military figures were closing in. Desperate, they made a break for it. They ran through the base's abandoned grounds, but the military figures were in hot pursuit. Just as they thought they had escaped, Captain Hayes and his men appeared, blocking their path. "You're not going anywhere," Hayes said with a cold smile. "The base was never meant to be a sanctuary. It's a trap. We've been luring survivors here to use them as test subjects for our experiments." Before the survivors could react, the military figures released a horde of zombies they had been keeping in cages. The undead surged forward, and the group fought bravely but was quickly overwhelmed. In the chaos, Mark managed to push a button on a control panel, causing the gate to close and trap the military figures inside with the zombies. The survivors seized the opportunity and fled, running through the wasteland until they reached a remote cabin miles away from the base. Exhausted but relieved, they took refuge in the cabin. They were safe from their pursuers, but the ordeal had left them physically and emotionally drained. The cabin offered some comfort and a chance to regroup. As they settled in for the night, Lily spoke up, her voice trembling. "Do you think we'll ever find a real safe place?" Mark looked at his friends, his expression resolute. "We'll keep searching. We have to. As long as we keep moving, we're still alive." The group huddled together, finding solace in their unity. Despite the dangers and uncertainty of their world, they had survived another day. Their journey was far from over, but they remained determined to face whatever came next. In the quiet of the cabin, they knew that the world outside was harsh and unforgiving. Yet, within the cabin's walls, they found hope and strength in each other. They understood that survival meant more than just finding a safe place, it meant continuing to fight for their lives and for each other. As they drifted off to sleep, the darkness outside was a constant reminder of the world they had left behind. But inside the cabin, they clung to the hope that their journey would eventually lead them to a place where they could finally find peace and safety.